Genshin Impact is a game built around having teams of 4 characters that support each other by giving buffs, supplying extra damage, and healing. Team building is all about balancing those to come out with the best team full of ripped men, pretty women, or children? Honestly, I don't play those characters too much, and trying to think about the ethics of selling children in a gambling game makes my head spin a little bit. But what if we just threw that all out the window? Meet Lyney. Lyney is a great pyro DPS that can do a ton of damage when built and played correctly. Specifically, if he's got 2 other pyro characters with him and a flex support depending on the situation. Like that one time the Sunny was in the abyss, boom, Charlotte. About to fight something tough and want interruption resist, boom, Zhongli. When he needs moral support because he's about to drop off the opera epiclese just for the fans, boom, Traveler. So what would happen if you tried to fight every single boss in Genshin Impact with only one very fragile twink? The answer is lose a lot of time and sanity, aggravate my tendinitis, as well as completely deplete my resources to the point that I have to start farming apples. No, I'm not kidding. I've stooped to new lows my short self didn't realize were even possible during this challenge. Now, I didn't just wake up one day and decide that it was time to suffer. No. That was the day that I met with my boss and decided that doing a doctorate degree sounded like a great idea. What happened was I needed a better DPS unit than Farina buffed Raiden in this day and age, and Lyney is a twink from Fontaine with a red aesthetic. What more could a girl ask for? Problem, I'd never used a bow character before. Solution, why don't I just fight every single boss in Teyvat with the twink and only the twink without using food buffs, healing items, or lowering my world level? Except for dealing with a pyro hypostasis. Listen, I've never been in a toxic relationship before, but simulating one by trying to drop a pyro ward with physical damage did not seem to be a good use of my time or my therapist's time. So let's get into the adventure of how it all went down, starting with the original land of twinks, Mondstadt. If you're curious, boom. Here's my Lyney build. Not the best, not the worst, just like my sleep schedule. And if you're wondering why Farina is around in many of the clips, aside from the fact that I'm an aggressively loyal Farina main, which seems odd given the nature of this challenge, but she's just there to heal up Lyney so I don't have to tank Teyvat's economy by causing food shortages. Mostly. I'm looking at you, Raiden. I'm looking at you.
Wait, I have to deal with that lightning permanently now? I have to deal with that lightning permanently?
It was a long time, it was a fun time, but it was not a good time. You may be wondering why my Akasha build says I'm using Song of Stillness, but Lyney clearly has Prototype Crescent. Don't worry about that. There's a logic to the lunacy, which I'll explain later. For now, let's get into the madness. Starting off strong, I took down the Animal Cube and the Cryo Regisvine. Easy money, no deaths. I decided to do this challenge by region, more or less, and do the overworld bosses before the weekly ones. So with that said, next up was Storm Terror. Everything started out well, with Lyney taking down his ward fairly quickly and dropping Storm Terror to the ground where we have access to his weak point. I was about to take just over half his health in one go, but without any supports, Lyney just doesn't hit hard enough to prevent him from going into a second cycle. This was the first boss that actually had me a little bit worried, since if you can't one cycle the guy, then he does an annoying little attack with a name I can't pronounce that's also the name of a banger piece of score. He cracks the platforms and has them cause you damage over time. This is where the problems begin. Lyney is what I like to call a pseudo self-sustain, in that while he can heal himself, he's not very good at it. Yes, he can heal, but in order to actually do that, he basically needs to be at full health. Like everyone else in Fontaine, he drains his HP when he fires a charged shot to build a stack. More specifically, when he does what's called a level 2 shot, which you can identify by this sound effect, or by the cat heads here. Wow, it's almost like they really want you to know that he likes cats. You use those stacks whenever you use his skill, and the more stacks you have, the more pyro damage it does, and the more you're healed. I swear, I know it's not as long a cooldown as like Noelle's skill cooldown, but when you're working with a character that has like 17k HP and the defense of a lawyer using AI, it feels like an eternity. In other words, in order to heal himself, Lyney has to not take damage. He gets a free stack when he uses his ult, but between my build and the skill cooldown, he only gets his ult about every 4 skill uses, which is about once every minute and a half, depending. So, how did I fare against the, Celestinum Finale
Celestinum Finale Termini.
Completely fine. What'd you think? It's Storm Terror, not Arlecchino. From there, I went to take on the other weekly boss of Mondstadt, the anti-wanderer puppy, aka Razor's buddy, aka Andreas, a dominator of wolves. This is where I took my first death. The problem in this case wasn't the damage from the wolf himself, though some of his attacks were annoying to dodge, but the terrain effect. Lyney picked up cryo and wasn't able to dodge as well, which, combined with the trickier things to dodge, led to his demise. These attacks only happen in the second phase, but it did take me a second to get used to it. About 6 seconds to get used to it. I think the worst part about this boss fight wasn't taking deaths on the counter as I tried to learn his attacks, but having to go back to the arena to restart the fight. Like, you can't tell me this is not purgatory. Hoyo, why didn't you make this a domain like literally every other weekly boss? Anyway, after 6 deaths, I put the anti-wanderer puppy down and was ready to move on to the next boss, the electro-hypostasis. This was another easy dub, but I was worried about destroying the prisms. Among other things which I've mentioned thus far, Lyney struggles if he needs to apply a lot of elemental damage in a short amount of time. So even with his burst charged up and ready to go, he wasn't able to one-cycle the zappy rock candy. Unfortunate. Next was the cryo-hypostasis. This was another boss I was worried about, though this time it wasn't because of arena hazards, although there are plenty of those. This time the fear came from experience. Experience I like to call trauma. This isn't the first time I've tried this challenge. I originally started doing it with a friend as a way to practice Lyney's gameplay since I'd never used a bow character in Genshin before. We made it to this boss, and I spent so long trying to beat him, but I kept getting run over by his little spinny attack, or I wasn't fast enough shooting back his spiky balls during the second phase. Though I did take a death here, it was only one, and I was done and moving on to the next boss, the Geo-hypostasis.
我姓石，无论何时与你相识我都值。我姓石，执笔写词犹如骏马在奔驰。我姓石，心往神驰，执笔再以落笔直。我姓石，高见远识，人如其名很务实。
At this point, you may be wondering why I'm using Prototype Crescent here instead of the other FTP option, Song of Stillness. On paper, Prototype Crescent does more damage. At R5, it provides an over 60% attack bonus after you get a headshot, whereas the Song of Stillness at R5 only provides an attack buff of about 30% after healing. They have the same base stats and main stats, so Prototype Crescent seems to be the better choice, assuming you can get good, which was half the point of the challenge anyway. In practice though, I realized about halfway through Sumeru bosses that, oh wait, why is the paper burning? I thought this was a good idea, what is going on? I was hitting headshots left and right, yet I wasn't hearing the weak point sound effect. Well, it turns out, and this is the crazy thing, the problem is that not all bosses have weak points. Sometimes bosses have heads, but you can't get a headshot. Sometimes bosses have weak points, but they don't count as a weak point shot, which means that in practice, Prototype Crescent is getting no attack bonus. So it turns out that, in fact, you get more consistent, bigger damage with Song of Stillness because not all bosses have weak points, and sometimes, even when they do, like Senora, they move around so much, their head is so tiny, and you're trying to dodge everything before you freeze to death or burn up like that paper that said Prototype Crescent was the way to go, so it's just better to use Song of Stillness instead. Oh, and this is just a reminder that I'm doing this challenge live on twitch.tv/skitscout if you want to watch me have more stupid realizations like this in real time. Okay, thanks, bye! The Geo-hypostasis is one of the few bosses where Lyney is simply incapable of fighting it alone. For the first phase, time isn't that big of an issue, but more importantly, as a bow character, he can just hit the rock candy when it's vulnerable on the pillars. So getting through the first phase isn't a problem. The problem is the second phase. You have to break the pillars quickly to prevent the cube from healing itself. Lyney cannot break a pillar in one cycle. The damage does not stay with them the next time the hypostasis puts them down. In other words, Lyney had to call in a little backup for this one. I was gonna go with Ga Ming originally since he was my best claymore that didn't create a shield, but then I remembered that Lyney gets an attack bonus just for having pyro characters in the team. And since Chongyun has the very important role of benchwarmer, I picked everyone's favorite twink, Kaveh, for the job instead. It took me a couple of tries on this one, but even though I had to walk across a good chunk of water to get to the arena every time, it still wasn't as demoralizing as going back to the Wolf Arena. Actually, I'm just assuming that walking over takes less time, but I could be wrong. what do you know? Next was the Oceanid. Now, it's not like I was trying to fight the Oceanid with Barbara, the Eye of Perception, and a dream, but that doesn't make this fight any less awful. I swear, the forced wait through the same dialogue that hasn't changed since day one of this game coming out is just... I wouldn't wish it upon my worst enemy. That being said, I did this one first try. So, the Pyro-type matchup didn't end up being too bad for me. Following the Oceanid, I picked a fight with the Primogeo Bishop. This one wasn't too bad of a fight either, since I'd had a little bit of practice doing this with my friend months ago, but there was a lot of hoping for a decent type matchup since it can be either Cryo, Hydro, Pyro, or Electro. And we got Electro. Getting Electro wasn't the worst element matchup, but I would have much preferred it if it had been Cryo. One death later, and we're on our way to fight the Pyro Regisvine. It's not as much of a pushover when you're trying to fight it with only one Pyro twink, but only 2 deaths later, and it was dead. Bro, look at how much HP Lyney ended on. That's so uncomfy. Next up was the Ruined Serpent. At first I was a little conflicted on whether or not I wanted to use the gadget to clear up the mucky stuff, since this is a Lyney only challenge. So I tried it without the gadget, realized I wasn't that much of a masochist, and then used it. Although it turned out it was only minimally helpful. Like, it did help, but I still had to use my ult to get through the attack fueled by it. When I realized this, I also realized I'd need to charge my ult before, which meant the chasm experienced a mass extinction, the likes of which have never before been seen onto that. The second to last boss for Liyue was Child, aka Tartaglia, aka Ajax, aka the 11th Fatui Harbinger, and the original Bow Twink. Wait, isn't that Venti? The original Hydro Bow Twink. Wait, he's the only one. Well, that bit doesn't work now, does it? Dang it. And just like all the other bosses I used to struggle with, I got it within a few attempts. All that was left was to snipe the Sunni in only a couple of attempts, and then there was one. Some of you may have noticed that one name hasn't left my lips. Some of you may have noticed which boss is the last one I did. In fact, I dreaded doing this boss so much that I didn't do it until I started doing Sumeru bosses. That's 2 regions away from here. That would be the one and only Azhdaha. Azhdaha. This was the original run killer. The reason I stopped trying to solo bosses with Lyney until I finally decided that I wasn't gonna be scared off by some frog. I had spent hours trying to fight him, but to no avail. I got so agonizingly, tantalizingly close to beating him, but I could never get past his Electro phase. You see, Azhdaha works just like the Geo Bishop from earlier. He cycles through Cryo, Hydro, Electro, and Pyro. But unlike the Geo Bishop, he will have 2 elements when you fight him, and you can tell which elements he's going to have based on the color of the symbols on the entrance to his domain. Pyro and Electro are by far the worst matchups for Lyney, though maybe not for the reason you might think. Pyro is simple enough, just a major damage res to deal with, but Electro is nigh impossible for a little solo Lyney to beat, in my experience. I'm sure there's some physical Amber main out there who's ready to put me to shame. When Azhdaha enters his Electro phase, he creates a sort of pie chart of Electro AoE. In order to dodge it, all you have to do is get into a slice that doesn't have the Electro on it. Simple enough. Except that you have to remember that the arena is massive, and you only have 2 dodges and a little bit of stamina which you're relying on for every cycle of the pie chart all at once. Even using my ult for iframes, I couldn't swing it after all my attempts. But this time was different. This time, I had a plan. We've got today Raiden, we have Skara. I'm not touching Senora. You know what? What is a Pep on today? I discovered that you can tell what elements he'll have for today. Okay, but actually, I can work with this. It's not Electro, and the Electro is the one that I have the most difficulty doing. I guess we're gonna do Azhdaha. We're gonna do the frog. Let's go. He should have Cryo and Hydro. I can work with Cryo and Hydro. So, I think we can do this one today. It's gonna suck, but I think we can do this one today. I want to get the Liyue and Inazuma one's done, and the fact that Azhdaha is undone bugs me. He's the last one from Liyue. You dare overstep your mortal authority. You're just a frog. Like, calm down. Who died and made you King Aji? Whoa! My bad. Alright, he's gonna do Hydro. Okay, I don't remember.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine.
Alright, so now I just have to pay attention. What did I just say? What did I just say? Oh gosh. Alright. I'm not hearing headshot. We have to keep an eye on where he's at too. Boop. Cowardly insects. Same energy as unsightly insects. Yeah, calm down, buddy. Okay, is he going to the center? Let's go! Okay, I'm not doing damage anymore. Let's use that just to get the ER. We get the little cutscene. Wow, this is going really well. Alright, this is going to be similar to the electro field, isn't it? Ooh, really close. Alright, that's enough time to get up a Mel. Oh gosh. That's my bad. I got greedy. I got greedy. I got so greedy. Alright, get out, get out. Boop. We're running out of food. Woot woot. Alright, now disappear. That's for me. I'm the one who's disappearing. Okay, I am annoyed. Alright, he's gonna do his snowflakes because he's a special snowflake. So here's an opportunity. Boop. Mel. Alright, now we have to focus on dodging. That was not focusing on dodging. Oh, that was very lucky. Holy. Alright, we got Mel up. Oh, he's got both of them! No fair. Just need Mel. If I can just get Mel on him, it's fine. Mel can do damage for me. Mel, come on. Mel, come on. You can get the final hit, Mel. We got it. Yes, let's go! She's goated. That only took like 5 tries. And so, ladies and gentlemen, that is how I conquered every overworld and weekly boss in all of Mondstadt and Liyue. It was hard and grueling and not fun at times, but all my patience paid off in spades. I conquered beasts that had seemed impossible to beat, and it felt good. And if you couldn't tell by the incorrect timer, the massive death count, and the rest of the context, I'm still going with this challenge. So if you want to watch me do silly things in real time, drop by my Twitch at twitch.tv/skitscout. I'll keep uploading videos based on the highlights of those streams here, so consider a like, comment, and subscribe here too, maybe? But it really is something to be there in the moment I finally win against a particularly tenacious boss. Just ask my prolific meme-making chat. I love them to death, and would not be the same without them. As always, thanks for watching, stay sexy, don't get murdered.